Modern Warfare 2 is one of the biggest multiplayer games that is going to drop this year. Not only because, well, it's COD, and COD is always one of the biggest games in a calendar year, but because this year especially, it seems like the multiplayer shooter market is just extremely stale. And some of the more recent big releases like Halo Infinite or Battlefield 2042 just not necessarily being up to par. This has led to us multiplayer shooter fans to mostly have to resort to the same handful of games that we've been playing for years now. Depending on you specifically, that could mean different things, but Modern Warfare 2 for many is a glimmer of hope for those that want something new to grind. Not only is it just big because not much has released this year or not much has been good, but it's actually going to be the first Call of Duty on a 2-year cycle instead of the standard yearly cycle, and this is a pretty big deal. Well, as I'm sure you all know, this past weekend was the open beta on PC, and I've had a decent amount of time to hop in and check it out, and while I was really hoping to enjoy this COD, so I had a new game to grind for a few months, I have found myself excessively frustrated and not having very much fun at all.
That's it. Screw this game.
Before we get too deep into, my issues with the game, I do like to give my background and disclaimers so you can kind of understand where I'm coming from. Obviously, I'm not a Call of Duty YouTuber, so I don't play Call of Duty religiously. However, like many others who grew up gaming in the late 2000s and early 2010s, that era of Call of Duty was absolutely goated. COD 4, Modern Warfare 2, Modern Warfare 3, Blobs, Black Ops 2, that whole era of Call of Duty games was absolutely amazing. I really enjoyed those games and probably put thousands of hours across the different titles. Eventually though, I did end up falling off of Call of Duty, partly because I moved over to PC and the PC support just wasn't that great, and I didn't really get back into the whole Call of Duty swing of things until Black Ops 4, because back then they were kind of pitching it as this first-class PC experience for the first time in years. Whether or not that ended up true is kinda up for debate, but Black Ops 4 was the first COD to launch on Battle.net instead of Steam, and so it did seem to get a little bit more love on PC than some of the more previous ones. Unlike a lot of people, I actually enjoyed Black Ops 4 and ended up playing a good amount of it, and then the following year I hopped back on to try Modern Warfare 19. Now, I ended up not being a huge fan, though I still probably played about 20 or so hours, and then from there I mostly skipped out on Cold War and Vanguard outside of trying the betas. I've also never really been a big Warzone player. That gets us to today, where I hoped that I would hop into Modern Warfare 2 and reignite some of the passion I had for Call of Duty. Unfortunately though, that hasn't really been the case. So let's talk about some of the issues that I have with the game, maybe some of these same issues that you're having, but also I do want to give the game props because there are some things that I really like. Obviously, Call of Duty does the basics very well. The game looks pretty good, the game has pretty good sound design, and the actual feel of shooting the guns in Call of Duty is great like it usually is. Now that's stuff that Call of Duty usually does right pretty much every single year, so I wasn't surprised to see that be the case.
Switching mags.
One of my biggest issues though with this game is the time to kill. It sort of feels like the whole game is the hardcore settings from a previous Call of Duty. This leads to a very campy playstyle where usually whoever gets the first shot off in a gunfight is going to end up getting the kill because there isn't really much to these engagements. You basically see someone, you shoot at them and they die, or you see someone and they shoot at you and you end up dying. Now Call of Duties in general don't have super long time to kill, and I haven't done extensive testing, but this one seems like one of the shortest time to kills across the entire franchise. It just really hasn't been something I have enjoyed. And I think a lot of that comes down to how I liked to play Call of Duty back in the day, or how I like to even play it recently. I don't like to sit in corners and camp and try and sound whore and listen for footsteps and jump out on people. I like to run and gun a bit and run around, have some fun, and obviously, maybe this isn't the most effective playstyle for Call of Duty, but in previous Call of Duty games, you can do this to a decent amount of success. In Modern Warfare 2, I have been absolutely struggling. Now that could be because I just suck at the game, it could be skill-based matchmaking, I don't really know. All I know is it really seems like the game incentivizes just sitting in corners and listening for those footsteps from your enemies because they are extremely loud. This is partly just because one, all the players are elephants apparently, but also because there's no dead silence perk other than as a field upgrade, which is something you have to earn during the game. This makes it so you can't just set dead silence and run around. I get the idea behind maybe why Infinity Ward wants to do this, but I think it comes to the detriment of the game flow, as you have a lot more people afraid to move around because those footsteps are so loud. This game also made a lot of movement changes compared to some of the more recent Call of Duties, and here I'm a bit more positive. Slide canceling has been mostly removed from the game, at least from what I can tell so far. The super standard way of slide canceling that you'll see in Modern Warfare 19 or Warzone or some of the other recent CODs has been removed from the game, but I have seen some workarounds that popped up, especially during the first weekend of the beta on PlayStation 4, but it seems like those have already been mostly removed, and it seems like Infinity Ward really wants sliding to be a very situational mechanic, not something that you are just constantly spamming to get into fights and just to move around the map. They also added dolphin diving back into this Call of Duty, and that's also very situational. You're really not going to use it very much from what I can tell. It seems the way that most players are playing, from my experience in my lobbies and also watching streams, is if you want to engage someone, you tag sprint and then you jump around the corner and you hope to win the gunfight. However, that can be pretty hard if they're actually holding the corner because of the time to kill, so unless they end up whiffing or just don't react fast enough, most of the time if you're jumping around a corner, the person holding that angle is probably going to kill you, which is something I don't really like because I like to have that skill in gunfights where you can outplay someone in a gunfight. But in Modern Warfare 2, there really isn't gunfights. You either just instantly kill someone or you instantly die. Another big issue that I have with Modern Warfare 2, and this kind of goes hand in hand with the gunplay, is the visibility when you're shooting people is absolutely atrocious. This is even exacerbated if you're just using the iron sights, but even when I'm using a red dot sight, when I'm shooting someone, the gun shakes so much and the muzzle flare is so crazy. There has been many times where I completely lose sight of the person I'm trying to shoot, and then they end up killing me. I think if you play on controller, this is slightly less of an issue because that little bit of aim assist can help you stay on the target even if you've lost sight of them. But if you're playing on mouse and keyboard, it can be hard to make micro adjustments when you just straight up can't see the person that you're shooting. That for me has been slightly less of an issue though, as I've started to use the red dots more, but it seems like the meta for guns, at least currently in the beta, is to go no sights at all and just use the iron sights. Now this goes hand in hand with the Gunsmith, which is something that I've never been a huge fan of, but in this game, I think it's even worse. All of the guns have a ton of attachments, and you can already see on Twitter and YouTube, people are breaking it down, they're putting out the meta builds, and really if you want to be killing people as fast as possible and have the best chance in your engagements, you're gonna want to use one of these meta builds. I'm not a huge fan of this. I strongly prefer the old Call of Duty system, where you had a handful of attachments, but they were mostly user preference. You had red dots, suppressors, and other things like that that definitely did have an impact on the gun. But at the end of the day, you mostly just picked the gun that you wanted to use and then the attachment that you liked. Where now you have to pick the gun that you want to use, whether it be the M4 or the AK-74U or whatever gun you want to use. You then level it up and get a ton of different attachments that you can mess around with to try and perfectly tweak your weapon to your liking. Don't get me wrong, that is pretty cool for people who really like to mess with that type of stuff, figure out the perfect meta weapon, or even figure out a weapon that just perfectly fits their playstyle. But for me, I really don't want to mess with that stuff, and I have found in my experience, at least using meta builds that I found on Twitter from different COD pros seems a lot more effective than just trying to use things myself, which just isn't really what I love about Call of Duty. It reminds me of playing something like World of Warcraft, where you have to look up the meta build for your class before you can optimize your FPS. That's sort of what's happening now in Call of Duty. Guns like the M4 and the MP5 can go from pretty strong to completely overpowered based on the build that you're using. And I'm sure some of those builds might get nerfed by the time that the game releases, but it's probably just going to be an ongoing thing. People find a new meta build for a gun, tons of people jump on it, start using it, and eventually it gets nerfed, and I'm just not a huge fan of that. I guess I'm just a more simple person, and I'd rather just go back to the pick 10 system, or even some of the earlier Call of Duties, where you'd only really be picking one attachment. Another thing that builds into this system is the fact that Infinity Ward sells weapon blueprints. Currently in the beta, if you buy the big $100 pre-order package, you can get that red M4 that comes with a variety of different attachments, and it has a little skin on it and whatnot. I didn't do any testing to figure out if that M4 is superior to the standard one, but I'm just not a huge fan of them selling weapon blueprints, but that's kind of what this whole system is built around. Another change that I know a lot of people don't like about this game is the fact that they've changed the radar. In old Call of Duties, if you used your gun without a suppressor, you would show up as a red dot on the minimap. This game has completely gone away from that. My understanding is this was supposed to help people so that you aren't forced to use a suppressor, and it's supposed to help, the more sedentary players who might want to camp a little bit and not necessarily have their spot pointed out to the world every time they shoot their gun. I think this is a detrimental change, as that radar had been like that since all of Call of Duty, and it does allow players now to not have to use a suppressor, but be able to just sit in a corner and camp with almost no downsides. The beta currently has 6 maps, 4 6v6 maps, and 2 maps of the bigger game modes like Invasion and Ground War. Overall, I think the maps are pretty decent, although I don't think they're anything spectacular in terms of map design, and I do think the aesthetics on some of the maps leave a little bit to be desired, like the Valderas Museum map. That one seems really boring and bland in terms of design, and I also think maybe it's a little bit too big for a 6v6 map. I feel like on some of the game modes, I'm kind of just running around looking for engagements, and it gives me some flashbacks to Ghosts when you would run around on those huge maps just looking for people the entire game. Other than that though, the maps seem pretty decent, though I will talk a little bit about those bigger maps when we talk about Invasion and Ground War. For game modes in the beta, we have, the standards, TDM, Domination, Hardpoint makes a return, Search and Destroy, and those are all pretty much what you would expect. They're not too bad, though S&D is usually my favorite game mode in Call of Duty. Although in this one with the campiness and the time to kill, I haven't really been enjoying S&D as much, and I've been leaning a little bit more on the respawn modes. Some newer game modes in this COD, at least to me, are Prisoner Rescue and Knockout, which are both round-based single-life modes that have different objectives. Knockout is based around a money system, and Prisoner Rescue is a hostage mode. These are both okay, though if I want to play a round-based single-life mode, I would probably just play S&D instead. They kind of seem to fit that same niche. Ground War and Invasion are the bigger scale game modes with much bigger lobbies. Ground War is going to be 32v32, and you're basically just playing Domination but on a much bigger scale. This isn't new to Modern Warfare 2, as I do remember it also being in MW19, and honestly, I don't mind it. I've always been a much bigger fan of the smaller base game modes in Call of Duty, but I did have a decent amount of time playing Ground War, as it feels a little bit less sweaty than some of those smaller scale modes, which can be pretty nice if you just want to kick back and chill and, shoot some things in Call of Duty. Invasion, on the other hand, I'm not as much of a fan of. I'd just much rather play Ground War if I wanted a bigger scale game mode. Invasion is 20v20, but the gimmick to it is that both teams have tons of AI that kind of fall out of the sky and are all over the map, and you can shoot these AIs to get points. You basically get 1 point for killing an AI and 5 points for killing a player. In theory, this could be pretty fun, having a little PvE in your Call of Duty, but in practice, I think it just ends up kind of underwhelming. The AI kind of just suck. They're really easy to kill. A lot of times they're pretty stupid. I remember at one point I got like a 5-piece of bots that literally just ran in a straight line at me while I sniped them. And so if I want to play a bigger scale mode, I just hop into Ground War. I think that one's a little bit better. That's kind of the main big issues that I have with Call of Duty and also the content that's in this beta, but there is some smaller things I still want to talk about. One is skill-based matchmaking. Now I understand this is here to stay, and I really don't even know if it's completely the issue, but this beta has been one of the most sweaty experiences I've had in a game in quite some time. It feels like, just to go positive, I'm absolutely trying my butt off, and I don't know if that's just because I absolutely suck at this Call of Duty, or if it's just because it's constantly putting me in lobbies where I need to be on my game if I want to get not absolutely slapped. Personally, I'd love to see much less strict SBMM. Obviously, you don't want a Call of Duty pro playing against a dude who can barely aim with his thumbsticks, but I think a lot of players would probably have a bit more fun if it was just a little bit less strict and felt a little bit more like a social lobby. If you're playing ranked and you're grinding a ranked ladder, it makes sense to have the matchmaking be super strict so that you don't end up with uneven matches. But when you're just trying to kick back and play social or grind camos or level up a loadout, I don't necessarily want to have to absolutely try my ass off just to do decently. I have seen some funny clips of people already reverse boosting in the beta, which is just hilarious, and I think that kind of points towards some of the issues that a lot of people just want to play Call of Duty to have fun. They don't want to have to absolutely try their hardest just to be able to play these standard modes. That's what ranked should be for. Other than that, I do want to talk about the UI in this game, specifically the menu UI. This is one of the worst menu UIs I think I've ever seen. Obviously, this isn't a make or break if Modern Warfare 2 is going to be a good game, but I want to know who designed this menu. The fact that it all scrolls vertically is absolutely atrocious. You can only see a few game modes at a time when you're picking a game mode. If you're trying to invite a friend, you can literally only see 3 people from your friends list at a time, which is super annoying. And I just think it's a terrible menu UI. I hope there's some major overhaul coming, but I highly doubt it. It is very aesthetically pleasing, but in practice is one of the worst menu systems I think I've seen in a AAA or just game in general in recent times. Another change in this game that I want to talk about is the Spectate mode. When you now spectate your teammates, instead of the standard first-person mode where you can see kind of what they're seeing, you get this weird over-the-shoulder perspective. And this isn't a big deal, but I just think this is a really weird change. It makes watching your teammates a lot less immersive. And if you're playing an S&D or a round-based mode, watching your teammate try and make a clutch is so much less hype because you really can't see what they're aiming at or what they're seeing to the same degree as when you have the same first-person view that they do. Again, this isn't a huge deal. I just think it's a weird change that didn't need to happen. But one thing that I think this could be an issue in is in the future, if there's a hacking problem, it'll be very hard to spectate people, especially in a war zone, to see if they're hacking with this perspective. You really won't be able to tell at all. I don't know if that played a part in maybe why they changed it to have less people calling out hacks on others, but I'm just not a big fan of the change. Other than that, the beta has been a bit buggy. I've seen a lot of reports of people just crashing, and I've gotten this weird bug multiple times where my sound just cuts out until I restart the game. These are things that I hope are fixed by the full release of the game. I just wanted to mention them. That pretty much is going to do it for everything I want to talk about for the Modern Warfare 2 beta. I'm hoping to see some major changes before the game drops, but usually COD betas are just glorified marketing stunts, so I really don't know how many changes we are going to see between the beta and the full release. And if the full release plays pretty similarly to the beta, I can't foresee myself wanting to sink much time into the game. Which I don't know if I'm alone there, but that might actually be an issue since this is a 2-year COD instead of the standard 1-year cycle. If the game doesn't have a good player retention, it might actually cause some serious issues. Now obviously this beta didn't show us Warzone 2 at all, which is probably going to be massive, and I do look forward to also checking that out. And this beta also didn't show us the new Call of Duty mode, which is sort of that escape from Tarkov mode. That's another thing that I look forward to checking out. Other than that though, let me know in the comments what you guys thought of the beta. Overall, like I said, I just wasn't a fan. I wasn't having fun. Once I leveled up my M4 all the way and I built one of the meta builds I found on Twitter, I did find myself doing a lot better in games than before when I was just using what I could. But even then, I still really wasn't enjoying this Call of Duty as much as I know I enjoyed other Call of Duties in the past. It doesn't really feel like an arcade shooter anymore, and it seems like Infinity Ward is trying to toe the line of almost being a tactical shooter. Some of the changes in this game almost make it lean closer to something like Insurgency than a Call of Duty of the past. And I don't know if that's supposed to be to cater toward casual players, or with this low time to kill and less repercussions for camping, almost anyone can get a kill, or what exactly is the reasoning behind some of these changes. I just know at the end of the day, I wasn't really enjoying it. I think that's going to do it for the video though, guys. Depending on if a lot changes between now and the full release, I'll hop in and maybe re-review the multiplayer, but otherwise I don't know if I will. If you guys enjoyed the video though, you know what to do. I've been live streaming on my second channel, Rash Live, so go over and give that a sub so you can come over and watch some of those live streams and kind of just chill and ask me questions while I'm playing games. Other than that, follow me over on Twitter and Instagram, and I'll see you all next time.